the apostle to the apostles. Among the most revered figures in Christianity, Mary Magdalene stands out, not only for her close association with Jesus Christ, but also for the mystery that surrounds her life. Often misunderstood and sometimes misrepresented, Mary Magdalene is referred to by the Church as the apostle to the apostles. She was the first to witness Christ's resurrection, and yet, her role in the early Church has been the subject of much debate. Why, then, is she so often sidelined in the narratives that define the core of Christian teaching? The Lost Gospel of Mary Magdalene, a text not included in the official canon of the New Testament, has sparked intrigue and curiosity. This gospel, along with other early Christian writings, offers a window into an alternate perspective on Mary Magdalene's life and her profound connection to Jesus Christ. It raises questions about the portrayal of Mary in the Gospels we know, suggesting that her role was far more significant than traditional interpretations have acknowledged. This lost gospel presents Mary Magdalene not just as a follower of Christ, but as a teacher and a leader in her own right. Someone who, according to this gospel, shared deep insights about Christ and Apostles' teachings. It suggests that she was a key figure in spreading the message of the kingdom of God, offering a perspective of intimate spirituality that was different from that of the male disciples. The mystery of her true role in early Christianity remains a fascinating enigma, one that invites further exploration. As we delve deeper into the lost gospel of Mary Magdalene, we will uncover not only the secrets of this powerful woman, but also the theological implications of what it means to be the apostle to the apostles. The life and legacy of Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene's life and legacy have been shaped by both her profound connection with Jesus Christ and the way in which history, theology, and cultural assumptions have obscured her true role. She was one of the few figures who remained with Jesus throughout his ministry, even during his crucifixion, when most of the other disciples had fled. As the first person to witness the risen Christ, her role in the foundational events of Christianity cannot be overstated. Yet, despite these crucial moments, Mary Magdalene's legacy has often been clouded by misconceptions, largely due to her portrayal in popular culture and some early Christian writings. In the canonical Gospels, Mary Magdalene is portrayed as a devoted follower of Christ who, after being healed of 7 demons, Luke 8 verse 2, became one of the most ardent supporters of his ministry. Her presence at the foot of the cross and her role as the first witness to Jesus' resurrection, John 20 verses 11 to 18, emphasize her significant role in the early church. In fact, her encounter with the risen Christ, where he calls her by name and commissions her to announce the resurrection to the apostles, earned her the title of Apostle to the Apostles. However, despite these pivotal moments, the Church has historically marginalized her compared to the male apostles. One of the most intriguing aspects of Mary Magdalene's legacy is the Lost Gospel of Mary, a Gnostic text discovered in the 19th century. Unlike the canonical Gospels, which primarily focus on the actions and teachings of Jesus, the Gospel of Mary presents a much more intimate account of Christ's relationship with his followers, particularly with Mary Magdalene. This Gospel emphasizes spiritual insight, personal revelation, and the deep understanding that Mary Magdalene had of Christ's message. It portrays her not as a repentant sinner, as she is often depicted in other sources, but as a disciple and even a leader within the early Christian community, entrusted with secret teachings that the male disciples struggled to understand. The Gospel of Mary suggests that Mary Magdalene's relationship with Jesus was unique, and her understanding of his message was profound. This portrayal stands in contrast to the traditional view of her as a follower and witness, often overshadowed by Peter, the rock of the church. In the Lost Gospel, Mary is portrayed as a person with deep spiritual authority, someone who had received intimate teachings from Jesus himself. This insight opens up new avenues of understanding, not just of Mary Magdalene's role in the early church, but of the broader place of women in early Christian communities. The Lost Gospel of Mary Magdalene, Insights and Revelation. The Lost Gospel of Mary Magdalene is a fascinating glimpse into the early Christian world, providing a radically different portrayal of Mary Magdalene than what is found in the canonical Gospels. This text, part of the collection of Gnostic writings, was rediscovered in the late 19th century, though it is believed to have been written around the 2nd century. Unlike the New Testament Gospels, which primarily focus on the physical resurrection of Christ and his public ministry, the Gospel of Mary delves into spiritual teachings and personal revelations. In the Gospel of Mary, Mary Magdalene is not just a passive figure. She is an active, central character who embodies a deeper spiritual understanding of Christ's message. One of the key themes in this Gospel is the notion of inner knowledge or gnosis, which was an essential element in many early Christian communities, particularly those influenced by Gnosticism. Gnosis refers to spiritual enlightenment, knowledge that transcends the physical world and leads to a deeper understanding of God's truth. Mary Magdalene is portrayed as possessing this gnosis, offering profound insights into Christ and Apostles' teachings that the male disciples fail to grasp. In the text, after Jesus' resurrection, Mary Magdalene comforts the disciples and shares with them the wisdom that she has received. Her teachings challenge the male disciples, especially Peter, who expresses doubt about her ability to understand the depth of Christ and Apostles' message. In one scene, Peter criticizes Mary for what he perceives as her excessive spiritual insight, while Levi, another disciple, defends her. This conflict highlights a fundamental tension between authority, gender, and spiritual insight within the early church. While Peter, as the leader of the apostles, is often depicted as the voice of authority, the Gospel of Mary elevates Mary Magdalene as the one who possesses a deeper, more intimate understanding of Jesus' teachings. The Gospel of Mary sheds light on the role of women in the early Christian movement, offering a compelling counter-narrative to the traditional male-centered hierarchy. It reveals a version of early Christianity where women were not only followers but also spiritual leaders, possessing authority, wisdom, and the ability to lead others in the faith. This vision contrasts sharply with the later institutionalized patriarchy of the Church, where women's roles were significantly limited. Despite its theological significance, the Gospel of Mary was never included in the canonical New Testament, and its teachings were ultimately marginalized by the mainstream church. This exclusion raises important questions about why certain voices were suppressed in the formation of Christian orthodoxy and how early Christianity grappled with the role of women. The Gospel of Mary, though fragmented, remains a powerful testament to the spiritual authority that Mary Magdalene may have held in the early church. Mary Magdalene's suppression in church tradition. The role of Mary Magdalene in the early church has been shrouded in mystery, and much of her spiritual authority was suppressed as the church developed over the centuries. Despite her significant role as the first witness to Christ's resurrection and her apparent leadership in the early Christian community, the Church Fathers and later theologians consistently diminished her place in Christian tradition. The reasons for this suppression are complex, rooted in both theological concerns and the patriarchal structure that took shape in the church over time. One of the primary ways Mary Magdalene and Apostles' legacy was marginalized was through her misrepresentation as a prostitute. In the Western Christian tradition, especially in the writings of Pope Gregory I, Gregory the Great, in the 6th century, Mary Magdalene was conflated with the unnamed sinful woman in the Gospel of Luke who anointed Jesus and Apostles' feet. This association between Mary Magdalene and sin became widely accepted in medieval Christianity, even though the New Testament makes no such connection. This portrayal obscured her true role as a devoted disciple of Christ, who was not defined by her past, but by her faith and her close relationship with Jesus. By elevating Mary Magdalene and Apostles' identity as a penitent sinner, the Church effectively distanced her from the leadership role she likely played in the early Christian movement. This reimagining of her identity as a reformed woman of sin contradicted the more radical portrait of Mary as the apostle to the apostles a leader who received secret teachings from Christ. The implications of this suppression are far-reaching, as it reinforced the exclusion of women from leadership roles within the Church, consolidating power in the hands of male apostles and bishops. The lost Gospel of Mary Magdalene, with its portrayal of Mary as a spiritual leader, challenges this traditional narrative. The Gospel reveals a Mary who is deeply connected to Jesus and Apostles' message and spiritual insights, placing her in a role of authority that was clearly not accepted by the early Orthodox Christian Church. According to the text, after Jesus' resurrection, Mary Magdalene is the one who offers comfort and wisdom to the disciples who are struggling with doubt. In fact, she becomes the one who explains Jesus' teachings, speaking with authority, and even instructing Peter, who often acted as the spokesperson for the group. This is a radically different portrayal of Mary than what was later emphasized by the church, and it highlights the tension between the early church's inclusive spiritual vision and the later institutionalized patriarchy. The church's suppression of Mary Magdalene's role as a teacher and leader reflects broader struggles within Christianity over issues of authority, gender, and orthodoxy. Mary Magdalene's teachings, as recorded in the Gospel of Mary, were not only about the nature of Christ and Apos' resurrection, but also about personal and spiritual enlightenment, a message that was perhaps too radical for an emerging church that sought to establish clear hierarchies and structures. The text's exclusion from the canonical New Testament underscores the complex dynamics of power within early Christianity and the marginalization of female voices in the formation of orthodoxy. Despite this suppression, Mary Magdalene's true spiritual authority continues to be rediscovered. In recent years, scholars and theologians have revisited her story, recognizing the powerful spiritual leadership she demonstrated. The rediscovery of the Gospel of Mary and its teachings is part of a broader movement to re-examine the role of women in the early church and to recover the lost voices of Christian history. The rediscovery and revival of Mary Magdalene and Apos' role. In recent decades, there has been a revival of interest in Mary Magdalene and her true role within the early Christian community. Scholars, theologians, and spiritual seekers have revisited the Gnostic texts, including the Gospel of Mary, shedding new light on her significance in the early church. Far from being a mere follower, Mary Magdalene is increasingly seen as a leader, a spiritual guide, and an essential figure in the transmission of Christ's message. The rediscovery of the Gospel of Mary in the late 19th century has played a crucial role in this reevaluation. The manuscript, which was part of the Nag Hammadi library discovered in Egypt in 1945, was long considered lost, hidden away in history. The Gospel provides a unique perspective on the teachings of Jesus, focusing on inner spiritual knowledge and gnosis, which Mary Magdalene is said to have fully understood and shared with the apostles. In the Gospel of Mary, she is depicted as someone who, after the resurrection, receives private revelations from Jesus and shares them with the apostles, guiding them in their understanding of Christ's true message. This new narrative challenges the traditional view of Mary Magdalene as a passive figure and repositions her as a spiritual authority on par with the male apostles. In one key passage, when Peter questions Mary's authority and challenges her teachings, another disciple, Levi, defends her, saying that Jesus clearly favored her and had imparted wisdom to her that the others could not comprehend. This exchange highlights the gender tension within the early Christian movement, where Mary Magdalene, despite her clear authority, faced skepticism and resistance from the male disciples. Mary Magdalene's role as the apostle to the apostles becomes even more powerful when we consider that she was the first to witness Christ's resurrection and the first to carry the message of his triumph over death to the apostles. This was no small feat. Yet, in the canonical Gospels, she is often relegated to the role of a passive witness. The Gospel of Mary, by contrast, empowers her as the primary witness and the one who holds the keys to the deeper, spiritual understanding of Christ's teachings. The revival of interest in Mary Magdalene's role, particularly in the context of her leadership and spiritual wisdom, represents a growing movement within Christianity that seeks to recover the lost voices and forgotten leaders of the early church. It also speaks to a broader cultural shift that challenges traditional gender roles, encouraging a more inclusive and holistic understanding of the church's history. As we re-examine the historical and spiritual significance of Mary Magdalene, it becomes clear that her role was far more central than has been traditionally acknowledged. By rediscovering texts like the Gospel of Mary, we can begin to understand the depth of her teachings and how her insights into Christ's message have the power to shape contemporary Christianity. Mary Magdalene's enduring legacy and influence today. The revival of Mary Magdalene's spiritual authority and the rediscovery of her teachings are not just academic exercises. They are part of a broader movement to re-examine the role of women in the church and to reclaim their place in the spiritual history of Christianity. Today, Mary Magdalene is revered not only as a saint, but also as a symbol of deep spiritual wisdom and resilience. Her story challenges traditional narratives and offers a more inclusive understanding of the Church and Apos as foundations. Her significance has been increasingly recognized in both theological circles and popular culture. In 2016, the Vatican officially recognized her as the Apostle to the Apostles in a more formal way, elevating her feast day to the level of a memorial rather than a simple commemoration. This act acknowledges the unique and central role Mary Magdalene played in the early Christian community. Additionally, her legacy is embraced by feminist theologians and spiritual seekers alike, who view her as a model of faith, courage, and wisdom, traits that transcend gender and serve as an inspiration for all Christians. Furthermore, the Gospel of Mary continues to influence modern spiritual practices. Its themes of inner knowledge, personal revelation, and the nature of Christ's teachings resonate with those seeking a more intimate, contemplative connection to God. As a result, Mary Magdalene has become a central figure in many spiritual journeys, especially those that seek to reclaim the feminine divine and acknowledge the overlooked contributions of women in the Church's history. Mary Magdalene's legacy, once marginalized, now stands as a testament to the power of faith, love, and revelation. A legacy that continues to inspire and guide believers who seek to follow in the footsteps of the Apostle to the Apostles. A call to embrace the wisdom of Mary Magdalene. As we reflect on the life and legacy of Mary Magdalene, we are called to ask ourselves, what can we learn from her example? Her story is one of faithfulness, courage, and wisdom, a reminder that spiritual leadership transcends traditional structures and that the voice of women in the Church has always been vital, even if it was not always recognized. The Gospel of Mary invites us into a deeper understanding of Christ and Apos' message, one that is not just intellectual but experiential, offering insights into the nature of spiritual enlightenment and the importance of personal revelation. Mary Magdalene's life reminds us that faith is not just about following rules, but about engaging with God on a deeply personal level, receiving His wisdom, and sharing that wisdom with others. Her example calls us to embrace a faith that transcends the ordinary, a faith that challenges us to see beyond the surface and to recognize the divine presence in all aspects of our lives. As we embrace the wisdom of Mary Magdalene, we are invited to grow in spiritual insight and intimate connection with God, just as she did on her journey with Christ. Amen.